The 11th attendant, who is the commander of the others, is known as the mind. He is the leader of the senses, both in the acquisition of knowledge and in the performance of work. The Panchala kingdom is that atmosphere in which the five sense objects are enjoyed. Within their Panchala kingdom is the city of the body, which has nine gates. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The mind is the center of all activities and is described here as Brihad Bala, very powerful. To get out of the clutches of Maya, the material existence, one has to control his mind. According to training, the mind is the friend and the enemy of the living entity. If one gets a good manager, his estate is very nicely managed. But if the manager is a thief, his estimate is spoiled. Similarly, in the material conditional existence, the living at sea gives power of attorney to his mind. As such, he is liable to be misdirected by his mind into enjoying sense objects. Srila Ambarish Maharaja, therefore, first engaged his mind upon the lotus feet of the Lord. Savai Mana Krishna Padaravindayo, when the mind is engaged in meditation on the lotus feet of the Lord, the senses are controlled. This system of control is called yama, and this means subduing the senses. One who can subdue the senses is called a Goswami, but one who cannot control the mind is called Godasa. The mind directs the activities of the senses, which are experienced through different outlets as described in the next verse. Okay, so therefore, text number 8. The eyes, nostrils, ears are pairs of gates situated in one place. The mouth, genital, and rectum are also different gates. Being placed into a body having these nine gates, the living entity acts externally in the material world and enjoys sense objects like form and taste. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Not being aware of his spiritual position, the living entity, directed by the mind, goes out through the nine gates to enjoy material objects. Because of long association with material objects, he forgets he has real spiritual activities. and is thus misled. The entire world is going on being misled by so-called leaders like scientists and philosophers who have no knowledge of the spirit soul. Thus, the conditioned soul becomes more and more entangled. Wow. Text number 9. Two eyes, two nostrils, a mouth, altogether five, are situated in the front. The rear ear is accepted as the southern gate, and the left ear is the northern gate. The two holes or gates situated in the west are known as the rectum and genital. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Of all sides, the eastern is considered most important, primarily because the sun rises from that direction. The gates on the eastern side, the eyes, nose, and mouth, are thus very important gates in the body. Text number 10. The two gates named Kadyota and Avirmukhi, which have been spoken of, are the two eyes side by side in one place. The town named Vibriyachita should be understood as form. In this way, the two eyes are always engaged in seeing different kinds of forms. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The two eyes are attracted by brilliant things like light. Sometimes we find that little insects are attracted by the brightness of the fire and thus anger into it forms.
Does enter
No, I'm
meaning.
sorry. Okay, yeah. The two eyes are attracted by brilliant things like light. Sometimes we find that little insects are attracted by the brightness of fire and thus enter into it. Similarly, the two eyes of the living entity are attracted by bright and beautiful forms. They are entangled in these forms exactly as the insect becomes attracted to fire. Text 11. The two doors named Nalini and Nalini, Nalini and Nalini, should be known as the two nostrils, and the city named Soraba represents aroma. The companion spoken of as Avaduta is the sense of smell. The door called the Mukhya is the mouth, and Vipana is the faculty of speech. Rasajna is the sense of taste. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The word Avaduta means, one second, the word Avaduta means most free. A person is not under the rules and regulations of any injunction when he has attained the stage of Avaduta. In other words, he can act as he likes. This Avaduta stage is exactly like air, which does not care for any obstruction. In Bhagavad Gita 634, it is said, Chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramati balavadritam tasyaham nigriham manye Vayar eva suduskaram. The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong. O Krishna. And to subdue it seems to me more difficult than controlling the wind. Just as the air or wind cannot be checked by anyone, the two nostrils situated in one place enjoy the sense of smell without impediment. When the tongue is present, the mouth continually tastes all kinds of relishable foodstuffs. Text number 12. The city called Apana represents engagement of the tongue in speech, and Bahudana is the variety of foodstuffs. The right ear is called the gate of Pitrihu, and the left ear is called the gate of Devahu. Text 13. Narada Muni continued. The city spoken of as Dakshina Panchala represents the scriptures meant for directing poverty, the process of sense enjoyment in fruitive activities. The other city, named Uttara Panchala, represents the scriptures meant for decreasing fruitive activities and increasing knowledge. The living entity receives different kinds of knowledge by means of two ears, and some living entities are promoted to Pitraloka and some to Devaloka. All this is made possible by the two ears. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Vedas are known as Shruti, and the knowledge received from them through oral reception is called Shrutadhara. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, one can be promoted to the planets of the demigods or to the planets of the Pitas, or forefathers, or even to the Vaikuntha planets, simply through the process of hearing. These things have already been explained in previous chapters. Yeah, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Nir, and so forth. Atmanivedanam. Yeah. Text 14. Asuri, Medram, Arva, Dvar, and so forth. The city called Gramaka, which is approached through the lower gate of Asuri, the genital, is meant for sex, which is very pleasing to common men who are simply fools and rascals. The faculty of procreation is called Durmada, and the rectum is called Nirvriti. Nirvriti.
Niriti.
Yeah, Nirvriti. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. When the world becomes degraded, civilization becomes demoniac, and for the common man, the rectum and the genital are taken very seriously as the centers of all activity. Even in such a sacred place as Vrindavana, India, unintelligent men pass off this rectal and genital business as spiritual activity. Oh my God. Such people are called Sahaja, according to their philosophy. Through sexual indulgence, one can elevate oneself to the spiritual platform. Well, that's not true. From these verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, however, we understand that the desires for sexual satisfaction are meant for the arvak, the lowest among men. To rectify these rascals and fools is very difficult. After all, sex desires uh,
Yeah.
of the common man are condemned in these verses. The word durmada means wrongly directed, and nirriti means sinful activity. Although this clearly indicates that sex indulgence is abominable and misdirected even from the ordinary point of view, the Sahajas nonetheless pass themselves off as devotees conducting spiritual activities. For this reason, Vrindavana is no longer visited by intelligent men. Uh-oh. Sometimes we are often asked why we have made our center in Vrindavana. From the external point of view, it can be concluded that Vrindavana has become degenerate due to these rascal Sahajias' activities. Yet, from the spiritual point of view, Vrindavana is the only place where all these sinful persons can be rectified by means of taking birth in the forms of dogs, hogs, and monkeys. Well, there's a lot of them in Vrindavan. Yeah. By living in Vrindavan as a dog, hog, or monkey, the living entity can be elevated to the spiritual platform in the next life. Therefore, we should not in any way harm the dogs, the hogs, and the monkeys in Vrindavan. They are all very advanced living entities. You wouldn't think so, but they are. So they should be given the respect that's due to them for being what you would call citizens of Vrindavan.
Hmm.
Text 15. When it is said that Puranjana goes to Vaisasa, it is meant that he goes to hell. Uh-oh. He is accompanied by Lubdaka, which is the working sense in the rectum. Formerly, I have also spoken of the two blind associates. These associates should be understood to be the hands and legs. Being helped by the hands and legs, the living entity performs all kinds of work and moves hither and thither, here and there, hither and thither. Text 16. The word antapura refers to the heart. The word visuchina, meaning going everywhere, indicates the mind. Within the mind, the living entity enjoys the effects of the modes of material nature. These effects sometimes cause illusion, sometimes satisfaction, and sometimes jubilation. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The mind and intelligence of the living entity in material existence are affected by the modes of material nature. And according to the association of the material modes, the mind is habituated to go here and there. The heart feels satisfaction, jubilation, or illusion according to the effects of the modes. of material nature. Actually, the living entity in his material condition remains inert. It is the mode, it is the modes of material nature that act on the mind and heart. The results are enjoyed or suffered by the living entity. This is clearly stated in the Bhagavad Gita 3:27. Pakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasa ahankara vimudatma kataham itimanyate. The bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by nature. Okay, very nice verse. Text 17. Formerly, it was explained that the queen is one's intelligence. While one is awake or asleep, that intelligence creates different situations. Being influenced by contaminated intelligence, the living entity envisions something and simply imitates the actions and reactions of his intelligence. Report by Srila Prabhupada. The queen of Puranjana is described herein as intelligence itself. Intelligence acts both in the dream state and in the waking state, but it is contaminated by the three modes of material nature. Since the intelligence is contaminated, the living entity is also contaminated. In the contaminated state, the living entity acts according to his contaminated intelligence. Although he simply remains an observant, he nonetheless acts, being forced by the contaminated intelligence, which in reality is a passive agent. Wow.
So in a way,
Yeah.
even though we think that the mind, it's basically intelligence, if it is not purified, it will lead to the wrong paths. But basically, that's what this is.
Okay.
Right? Because
being forced by a contaminated intelligence, which in reality is a passive agent. Okay. There's a lot of contaminated intelligence in this world. Yeah, definitely. Contaminated intelligence.
That's why we should be hearing Shastra to purify our intelligence.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so now text 18 to 20. Narada Muni continued. What I referred to as the chariot was in actuality the body. The senses are the horses that pull the chariot. As time passes, year after year, these horses run without obstruction. But in fact, they make no progress. Wow. Pious and impious activities are the two wheels of the chariot. The three modes of material nature are the chariot's flags. The five types of life air constitute the living entity's bondage. And the mind is considered to be the rope. Intelligence is the chariot driver. The heart is the sitting place in the chariot. And the dualities of life, such as pleasure and pain, are the knotting place.
What is the knotting place?
A knot, you make a knot, you tie a knot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's where you get stuck. You get
Mm.
you get tied up. The seven elements are the coverings of the chariot, and the working senses are the five external processes. The eleventh, the 11 senses are the soldiers, being engrossed in sense enjoyment. The living entity seated on the chariot hankers after fulfillment of his false desires and runs after sense enjoyment, life after life. Well, this is a factual description of the position of the living entity that is addicted to sense gratification and cannot free himself. He needs the help of a person who is already liberated in order to understand his real position in life. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The entanglement of the living entity in sense enjoyment is very nicely explained in these verses. The word samvatsara, meaning the progress of time, is significant. Day after day, week after week, fortnight after fortnight, month after month, year after year, the living entity becomes entangled in the chariot's progress. The chariot rests on two wheels, which are pious and impious activities. Yeah, we can go either way because we have limited free will. The living entity attains a certain position in life and particular type of body according to his pious and impious activities. But his transmigration into different bodies should not be taken as progress. Real progress is explained in Bhagavad Gita 4.9. Tyaktva punarjanma naiti. One makes real progress when he does not have to take on another material body. Well, that's a fact. As stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 19:1.38. Eta Brahmanda Bari Ananta Jivagana Chorasi Alaksha Yonite Karaye Brahmana. The living entity is wandering throughout the entire universe and taking birth in different species on different planets. Thus, he moves up and down, but that is not real progress. Real progress is getting out of this material world altogether. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 8:16, Brahma Bhuvanal Loka Punar Avartina Richina Mam Upekya Tukonteya Punarjanma Navidyate. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. So this is a very important verse, and it's quoted here. It's quoted in other places also. Even if one is promoted to Brahmaloka, the highest planet in the universe, he has to come down again to the lower planetary systems. Why? Because he hasn't become Krishna conscious yet. He's not purely Krishna conscious. Thus, he is wandering up and down perpetually under the influence of the three modes of material nature. Being illusioned, he thinks he is making progress. He is like an airplane encircling the earth day and night. incapable of leaving the Earth's conditions, the Earth uh, gravitational field. Factually, there is no progress because the airplane is conditioned by the Earth's gravity. Just as a king is seated on a chariot, the living entity is seated on the body. The seating place is the heart, and the living entity sits there and engages in the struggle for existence, which goes on without progress perpetually. In the words of Narottama Dasa Thakura, Karma Kanda Jana Kanda Kevala Vishirabandha Amrita Valya Yeva Kaya Nana Yoni Sada Pure Kadarya Bhakshana Kare Kara Janma Adha Pate Yaya. The living entity struggles very hard due to the influence of fruitive activity, the mental speculation, and simply gets a different type of body life after life. He eats all kinds of nonsense and is condemned by his activities of sense enjoyment. If one really wants to progress in life, he must give up the ways of karma kanda and jnana kanda, fruitive activities and mental speculation. Being fixed in Krishna consciousness, one can become free from the entanglement of birth and death and the vain struggle, vain meaning useless, struggle for existence. In these verses, the words Mriga Trishnan Pradavati are very significant because the living entity is influenced by thirst for sense enjoyment. He is like a deer that goes to the desert and search out water. Well, the deer is not going to find water in the desert. Although you may see what is called a mirage of water in the desert, which is a false, uh, let's say, which is falsely represented by heat and light. In a desert, an animal simply searches in vain for water. Of course, there is no water in the desert, and the animal simply sacrifices his life in an attempt to find it. Everyone is planning for future happiness, thinking that somehow or other, if he can reach a certain point, he will be happy. In actuality, however, when he comes to that point, he sees that there is no happiness. This he then plans to go further and further to another point. This is called Mriga Trishna, and its basis is sense enjoyment in this material world. Actually, there's no real sense enjoyment in the material world. It's all misery due to the body and the misunderstanding of one's position in this material world, being situated in a temporary body. Uh, so it's impossible to actually be happy in the material world, although everyone is trying their best to achieve that happiness. There are little squirts of, let's say, happiness, but most of the time one is suffering. What was previously explained in Chandavega, powerful time, is covered by days and nights named Gandharvas and Gandharvis. The body's lifespan is gradually reduced by the passage of days and nights, which number 360. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The word parikrantya means by traveling. The living entity travels on his chariot day and night during a year consisting of 360 or more days and nights. Life's progress is taken for the unnecessary labor required to cover these 360 days and nights of life. Text 22. What was described as kalakanya should be understood as old age. No one wants to accept old age, but Yavaneshwara or Yavana Raja, who is death, accepts Jara, old age, as his sister. Well, nobody wants to be in that family. Purport. Encaged within the body, the living being accepts kalakanya, old age, just before death. Yavaneshwara is the emblem of death. And Yamaraja, before going to the place of Yamaraja, the living entity accepts Jara, old age, the sister of Yamaraja. One is subjected to the influence of Yavanaraja and his sister due to impious activity. Those who are in Krishna consciousness and are engaged in devotional service under the instructions of Narada Muni are not subjected to the influence of Yamaraja and his sister Jara. If one is Krishna conscious, he conquers death. After leaving the material body, he does not accept another body that is material, but returns home back to Godhead. This is verified by Bhagavad Gita 4.9. Text 23 to 25. The followers of Yavaneshwara or Yamaraja are called the soldiers of death. Wow. And they're known as various types of disturbances that pertain to the body and mind. Prajvara represents the two types of fever, extreme heat and extreme cold, typhoid and pneumonia. The living entity lying down within the body is disturbed by many tribulations pertaining to providence. Providence usually refers to karma. To other living entities and to his own body and mind. Despite all kinds of tribulations, meaning troubles, the living entity subjected to the necessities of the body, mind, and senses, and suffering from various types of disease, is carried away by many plans due to his lust to enjoy the world. Although transcendental to this material existence, the living entity, out of ignorance, accepts all of these material miseries under the pretext of false egoism. I and mine. In this way, he lives for 100 years within this body. Just imagine 100 years of living in illusion and suffering various types of diseases and carried away by many plans due to his lust to enjoy the world. Very, very, let's say, sad situation of the living entity. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In the Vedas, it is stated, Asango Yam Purusha. The living entity is actually separate from the material existence. For the soul is not material. In Bhagavad Gita, it is also said that the living entity is the superior energy, and the material elements, earth, water, fire, air, and so on, are the inferior energy. The material elements are also described as bina, or separated energy. When the internal or superior energy comes in contact with the external energy, it is subjected to so many tribulations. In Bhagavad Gita 2.14, the Lord also says, Matrasparsas tu konteya sitosna sukhadukudaha. Dukkha da, I'm sorry, not daha, but dukkha da. Because of the material body, the living entity is subjected to many tribulations brought about by air, water, fire, extreme heat, extreme cold, sunshine, excessive eating, unhealthy food, maladjustments of the three elements of the body, kapha, pitta, and vayu, and so on. The intestines, the throat, the brain, and the other parts of the body are affected by all kinds of diseases that are so powerful that they become sources of extreme suffering for the living entity. Yeah, we see this in life. The living entity, however, is different from all these material elements. The two types of fever are described in this verse can be explained in contemporary language as pneumonia and typhoid, both very unappreciated states of or sicknesses that one can have. When there is an extreme fever in the body, there is typhoid and pneumonia, and they are described as prajvara. There are also other miseries created by other living entities. The state exacts taxes, and there are also many thieves, rogues, and cheaters. Miseries brought about by other living entities are called adhibotika. Adhibotika. There are also miseries in the form of famine, pestilence, scarcity, war, earthquakes, and so on. These are caused by the demigods or other sources beyond our control. Actually, there are many enemies of the living entities, and these are all described to point out how miserable this material existence is. Knowing the basic misery of material existence, what is the basic misery of material existence? That is ignorance, not knowing who Krishna is. One should be induced to get out of the material clutches and return home back to Godhead. Actually, the living entity is not at all happy in this material body. Because of the body, he suffers thirst and hunger and is influenced by the mind, by words, by anger, by the belly, by the genitals, by the rectum, and so on. Manifold miseries encircle, manifold means many different types of miseries, encircle the transcendental living entity, simply because he desires to satisfy his senses in this material world. If he simply withdraws from activities of sense gratification and applies his senses in the service of the Lord, all the problems of material existence will immediately diminish. Okay, that's the solution. And with the advancement of Krishna consciousness, he will be freed from all tribulation. And after giving up the body, he will return home back to Godhead. Haribol, that's the solution. Text 26 and 27. The living entity by nature has minute independence to choose his own good or bad fortunes. But when he forgets his supreme master, the personality of Godhead, he gives himself up into the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Being influenced by the modes of material nature, he identifies himself with the body and, for the interest of the body, becomes attached to various activities. Sometimes he is under the influence of the modes of ignorance, sometimes the mode of passion, and sometimes the minds of goodness. The mode of goodness, the mode of goodness. The living entity thus gets different types of bodies under the modes of material nature. These different types of bodies are explained in Bhagavad Gita 13.22. Purusha prakriti stohi mukte prakritijan gunam karanam gunasangosya sadasad yoni janmasu. The living entity in material nature follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus, he meets with good and evil among various specimens. Well, that's not a desirable situation to be in. But unfortunately, that is uh, experienced by 99% of the people in the world. Because of associating with the modes of nature, the living entity gets a variety of bodies from the 8,400,000 forms. It is clearly explained herein that the living entity has a little independence, indicated by the words svadrik, meaning one who can see his own welfare. The living entity's constitutional position is very minute, and he can be misled in his choice. He may choose to imitate the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A servant may desire to start his own business and imitate his master. And when he chooses to do so, he may leave the protection of his master. Sometimes he is a failure, and sometimes he is successful. Similarly, the living entity, one second, the living entity, part and parcel of Krishna, starts his own business to compete with the Lord. Wow, that's not possible to succeed. There are many competitors out to attain the Lord's position. But to become like the Lord is not at all possible. Thus, there is a great struggle for existence with the material world as different parties try to imitate the Lord. Material bondage is caused by deviation from the service of the Lord and attempts to imitate him. The Lord is imitated by Mayadevi philosophers who try to become one with the Lord in an artificial way. When the Mayavadi philosophers think of themselves as liberated, they are under the delusion of mental concoction. Very important statement. No one can become one with or equal to God. To imagine this is to continue one's bondage in material existence. Well, it's a false narrative to think one can become equal to or greater than the Lord. We are always subordinate. But most people think that they can become equal or greater than the Lord. Text 28. Those who are situated in the mode of goodness act piously according to Vedic injunctions. Oh, that's good. Thus, they are elevated to the higher planetary systems where the demigods live. Well, yeah, but that's not the real situation of liberation. Those who are influenced by the mode of passion engage in various types of productive activities in the planetary systems where the human beings live. That's a waste of time. Similarly, those influenced by the mode of darkness are subjected to various types of misery and live in the animal kingdom. Also a waste of time. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There are three planetary systems, upper, middle, and lower. Those influenced by the mode of goodness are given places in the upper planetary systems, Brahmaloka or Satyaloka, Tapoloka, Janaloka, and the Maharloka. Those influenced by the mode of passion are given places in the Burloka and Bhuvarloka. Those influenced by the mode of ignorance are given a place in Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Tala, Tala, Mahatala, Rasala, Patala, or the animal kingdom. Qualitatively, the living entity is the same as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but because of his forgetfulness, he gets different bodies in different planetary systems. At the present moment, human society is overly influenced by the mode of passion, and consequently, people are engaged in working in big factories. They forget how distressful it is to live in such places. In Bhagavad Gita, such activities are described as ugra karma, that is, distressful activities. Those who utilize the energies of the worker are called capitalists, and those who actually perform the work are called laborers. In actuality, they are both capitalists, and the workers are in the modes of passion and ignorance. The result is that there is always a distressful situation. In contrast to these men are those influenced by the mode of goodness. Important point. In other words, the result is that there is always a distressful situation. In contrast to these men are those influenced by the mode of goodness, the karmis and the jnanis. The karmis, under the direction of Vedic instructions, try to elevate themselves to higher planetary systems. The jnanis try to merge into the existence of Brahman, the impersonal feature of the Lord. In this way, all classes of living entities in various species of life are existing within this material world. This explains superior and inferior life forms within the material world. Yeah, there's so many different forms of life that one can assume due to their karma. Text 29. Covered by the mode of ignorance in material nature, the living entity is sometimes a male, sometimes a female, sometimes a eunuch. A eunuch is a person who does not have the ability to use their sex organs for sense gratification. So eunuchs were allowed to associate with women to like a servant, and they could bathe the women, and even though the women were naked, they would not be disturbed by it because they couldn't engage their genitals in a normal way. They were castrated. Look that up, eunuch. A eunuch is a man who is actually castrated, whose genital is not functioning to have sex. Eunuch. 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 Eunuch.
It says like a man who has been castrated,
It means his genitals have been cut off.
especially one employed to guard the woman's living areas.
Yeah, because they can't really have sex anymore. Their sex or genitals have been cut off in a sense. Yeah, that's it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Sometimes a eunuch, sometimes a human being, sometimes a demigod, sometimes a bird, an animal, and so on. In this way, he is wandering within the material world. His acceptance of different types of bodies is brought about by his activities under the influence of the modes of nature. Wow. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Actually, the living entity is part and parcel of the Lord. Therefore, he is spiritual in quality. The living entity is never material, and his material conception is simply a mistake due to forgetfulness. Okay, so all of us are in a state of mistakes due to forgetfulness of our real position as servants of the Lord. He is as brilliant as the brilliance. The Lord is like the full shining sun, and the living entities are like the small particles of that sun, which constitute the all-pervasive sunshine. When these small particles are covered by the cloud of Maya, they lose their shining capacity. When the cloud of Maya is gone, the particles again become brilliant and shining. As soon as the living entity is covered by the ignorance of Maya or darkness, he cannot understand his relationship with the Supreme God. Somehow or other, if he comes before the Lord, he can see himself as shining as the Supreme Lord, although he is not as extensive as the Lord. Because the living entity desires to imitate the Supreme Lord, he is covered by Maya. We cannot imitate the Lord, nor can we become the supreme enjoyer. Okay, this is not possible. And when we think it is, we become conditioned by Maya. Thus, the engagement of the living entity under the clutches of Maya is brought about by forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Lord. A lot of people that have forgotten Krishna, too many in the material world. Under the influence of Maya, the living entity becomes exactly like a person haunted by a ghost. Such a person speaks all kinds of nonsense. When the living entity is covered by the influence of Maya, he becomes a so-called scientist, philosopher, politician, or socialist. So, when the living entity is covered by the influence of Maya, he becomes a so-called scientist, philosopher, politician, or socialist, and at every moment presents different plans for the benefit of human society. Well, not one of those plans is tangible. All these plans are ultimately failures, exactly, because they are illusory. In this way, the living entity forgets his position as an eternal servant of the Lord. Well, I thought this plan could work, but now I see it hasn't worked at all. He instead becomes a servant of Maya. In any case, he remains a servant. It is his misfortune that by forgetting his real contact with the Supreme Lord, he becomes a servant of Maya. As a servant of Maya, he sometimes becomes a king, sometimes an ordinary citizen, sometimes a brahmana, a sudra, and so on. Sometimes he is happy, man, sometimes prosperous, man, sometimes a small insect, sometimes a man, sometimes he is in heaven and sometimes in hell. Sometimes he is a demigod and sometimes he is a demon. Sometimes he is a servant and sometimes he is master. In this way, the living entity wanders all over the universe. Only when he comes in contact with the bona fide spiritual master can he understand his real constitutional position. He then becomes disgusted with material existence. At that time, in full Krishna consciousness, see, now that's an interesting statement. He becomes disgusted with material existence. At that time, in full Krishna consciousness, he regrets his past experiences in material existence. This regret is very beneficial because it purifies the living entity of material conditional life. He then prays to the Lord to engage in him, in his service, engage in his service at that time. Krishna grants liberation from the clutches of Maya. Lord Krishna explains this in Bhagavad Gita 7.14. Davihi esagunamayi, mama maya duratya, mam evaye pragyante mayam itam tarantite. The divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So, what is difficult or seemingly impossible to overcome is easily overcome by the devotees who have surrendered unto the Lord, and they can easily cross beyond the uh, three modes of material nature. But only those devotees who are surrendered to Krishna can easily cross beyond the three modes of material nature. Only by the grace of Krishna can one get out of the clutches of Maya. It is not possible to get out by mental speculation or other activities. When the living entity understands his real position by the grace of Krishna, he keeps himself always fit in Krishna consciousness and acts accordingly. Thus, he gradually becomes completely free from the clutches of Maya. When he is strong in Krishna consciousness, Maya cannot touch him. In this way, in the association of Krishna conscious devotees, the living entity can get free from the contamination of material energy. In this connection, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, Tate Krishna Bhaje Kare Gurura Sevana Mayi Jala Chute Paya Krishnira Charana. In the Krishna conscious state, the living entity engages in devotional service under the direction of the spiritual master. In this way, he gets out of the clutches of Maya and takes shelter under the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Madhya 22.25. But many people, let's say most people, do not want to take the proper steps to free themselves from Maya. In fact, they become servants of Maya. And even though they might become a king or sometimes an ordinary citizen or sometimes a brahmana, a sudra, and so on. And sometimes he's happy and sometimes he's a man and sometimes a prosperous man and sometimes a small insect. Sometimes he is in heaven and sometimes in hell. Sometimes he's a demigod and sometimes in a body. The living entity wanders all over the universe. Only when he comes in contact with the bona fide spiritual master can he be understood. No, can he understand his real constitutional position? He then becomes disgusted with material existence. At that time, in full Krishna consciousness, he regrets his past experiences in material existence. This regret is very beneficial because it purifies the living entity of material conditional life. He then prays to the Lord to engage in his service And at that time, Krishna grants liberation from the clutches of Maya. Lord Krishna explains this in Bhagavad Gita 7.14. Daivi esa gunamayi mama maya durakaya mam ava prapadyante mayame tam tarantite. This divine energy of mind consisting of the three modes of material nature is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Only by the grace of Krishna can one get out of the clutches of Maya. It is possible to get out by mental speculation. It is not possible. It is not possible to get out by mental speculation or other activities. When the living entity understands this real position, by the grace of Krishna, he keeps himself always fit in Krishna consciousness and acts accordingly. Thus, he gradually becomes completely free from the clutches of Maya. When he is strong in Krishna consciousness, Maya cannot touch him. In this way, in the association of Krishna conscious devotees, the living entity can get free from the contamination of material existence. In this connection, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, Tate Krishna Bhaje Kare Gurura Sevana Maya Jali Chute Paya Krishnera Charana. In the Krishna conscious state, the living entity engages in devotional service under the direction of the spiritual master. In this way, he gets out of the clutches of Maya and takes shelter under the lotus feet of the Lord. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya 22.25. Text 30 to 31. One second. Translation. The living entity is exactly like a dog who, overcome with hunger, so a dog that's very hungry, goes from door to door for some food. According to his destiny, he sometimes receives punishment and is driven out, and at other times receives a little food to eat. Similarly, the living entity, being influenced by so many desires, wanders in different species of life according to destiny. While destiny is your karma based on what you did previously. And because of your previous activities, you get what's called karma, reaction to uh, uh, to all the sinful or nonsense things that you've done in previous time. Sometimes he is high, and sometimes he is low. Yeah, so you can have good karma or bad karma. Sometimes he goes to the heavenly planets, and sometimes to hell, sometimes to the middle planets, and so on. So in all those positions, one is still conditioned by Maya and basically still under the clutches of Maya. They engage in all kinds of different activities, but they are acting in illusion, and they never actually get liberated from the cycle of birth and death. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The living entity's position is herein likened to a dog's. By chance, the dog may have a very rich owner, and by chance, he may become a street dog. As the dog of a rich man, he will live very opulently. Sometimes in Western countries, we hear of a master leaving millions of dollars to a dog in his will. Of course, there are many dogs loitering in the street without food. Therefore, to liken the conditional existence of the living entity to that of a dog is very appropriate. An intelligent man, an intelligent human being, however, can understand that if he has to live the life of a dog, he has best become Krishna's dog. Oh, that's good advice.
Mhm.
In the material world, a dog is sometimes elevated and is sometimes on the street. But in the spiritual world, Krishna's dog is perpetually, eternally happy. Okay, so then we should also always desire to be Krishna's dog. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura has therefore sung Vaishnava Thakura Tomara Kukura Baliya Janaha Mori. In this way, Bhakti Vinod Thakura offers to become a Vaishnava's dog. A dog always keeps himself at his master's door and does not allow any person unfavorable to the master to enter. Similarly, one should engage in the service of a Vaishnava and try to please him in every respect. Unless one does so, he does not make spiritual advancement. Apart from spiritual advancement in the material world, if one does not develop his qualities and goodness, he cannot be promoted to the higher planetary system. As confirmed by Bhagavad Gita 14:18, Urdvam gachanti satvasa, madhye tishtanti rajasa, jaganya gunavrittista, adho gachanti tamasa. That's very nice poetry. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. There are many varieties of life in the different planetary systems, and these come about due to the living entities developing his qualities in goodness, passion, and ignorance. If one in goodness, if one is in goodness, he is promoted to the higher systems. If if in passion, he remains in the middle systems. And if in ignorance, he is punished down to lower species of life. Yeah, but how low can you go? That is the question. How low you can go. Text 32. The living entities are trying to counteract different miserable conditions pertaining to providence. Okay, so whenever it's providence, we're talking about karma, the based on previous activities, and they can, in the present, either enjoy or suffer due to their previous activities. That's called karma. That's called providence. Other living entities or the body and mind. Still, they must remain conditioned by the laws of nature, despite all attempts to counter these laws. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Just as a dog wanders here and there for piece of bread or punishment, the living entity perpetually wanders about trying to be happy and planning in so many ways to counteract material miseries. Are we over time now?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to stop right there. These are really very good verses, and there's a lot of tremendous information in the purports. And we'll start from text 32 tomorrow. Are there any questions? Any questions or comments about what we have heard? There's a very nice statement here in text number 31. It's a statement by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he has sung Vaishnava Thakura Tomara Kukura Baliya Janaha More. In this way, Bhaktivinoda Thakur offers to become a Vaishnava's dog. A dog always keeps himself at his master's door and does not allow any person unfavorable to the master to enter. Similarly, one should engage in the service of a Vaishnava and try to please him in every respect. Unless one does so, he does not make spiritual advancement. Apart from spiritual advancement in the material world, if one does not develop his qualities in goodness, he cannot be promoted to the higher planetary system. As confirmed by Bhagavad Gita 14:18, Urdvam gachanti sattvasta madhyetastanti rajasa jaganya gunavritti sta adho gachanti tamasaha. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the modes of passion live on the earthly planets, and those who and those in the mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. There are many varieties of life in the different planetary systems, and these come about due to the living entities developing his qualities in goodness, passion, and ignorance. If one is in goodness, he is promoted to the higher systems. If in passion, he remains in the middle systems. And if in ignorance, he is pushed down to the lower species of life. That should be our takeaway for today. Okay, thank you very much, my dear devotees. Tomorrow we'll begin from text 32. Any questions, comments about what we have heard? Very profound things that we've heard today, every day in Krishna consciousness, because we're hearing not only the verses, but we're hearing the purports by Srila Prabhupada. That means that we have what's called a double whammy. We hear the verse and we also hear the purport of Srila Prabhupada. Without the purport of Srila Prabhupada, we will not be able to understand the real meaning of the verse. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any questions, comments?
Hare Krishna, Harivilas Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances. I have a question. So, all of us who are on earth are basically in mode of ignorance, but I know some are in mode of goodness and passion as well. So, is that what we should understand? Thanks.
Well, what we want to understand is how to rise above the modes of material nature to a position of being transcendental. And then we are liberated from the cycle of birth and death. Simply remaining under the influence of the three modes of material nature, that means that we don't really make tangible spiritual advancement. But when we transcend the influence of uh, ignorance and passion and goodness, we come to the transcendental position of pure Krishna consciousness. That is what we should aim for. It's pure Krishna consciousness. Remaining under the influence of the three modes of material nature means that we are still, even if we're in a mode of goodness, we are still conditioned and cannot really become liberated from the cycle of birth and death. We want to transcend the influence of the modes of nature. And the way to do that is to be in the association of liberated persons. So, a liberated person is someone who has no interest in anything other than Krishna consciousness. So, a person who's always Krishna conscious should be our friend and should be the person that we hear Bhagavatam from. Then we can make tangible spiritual advancement. We don't want a sometimes Krishna consciousness and sometimes not Krishna consciousness type of person. We want a person to instruct us who is always Krishna conscious and always dedicated to teaching how to surrender to the Lord and be a genuine devotee. Haribol. So we don't want to go up to the heavenly planets by being in the mode of goodness or being in the mode of passion and live on the earthly planets or in the mode of goodness and go down to the hellish worlds. We want to be transcendental to the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, and become liberated from living in the material world. We want to go back to Godhead. In fact, at one point, the devotees used to sing, "We're going home back to Godhead." Well, that may be true or may not be true. It depends. But the meaning that going back to Godhead is very important. In fact, absolutely essential. If we want to understand what is the purpose of life. Just going back to the heavenly planets is not the solution, is not the best situation. It's better than being in hell, but it's not the most desirable situation. We should be liberated from the cycle of birth and death by engaging in pure Krishna consciousness without any attraction or desire for sense gratification in the material world. When we reach that platform, that means that we have made tangible and real spiritual advancement, where we're no longer attracted by anything that is Maya. Maya means sense gratification. But you'll see that normal people are all under the yoke or the influence of Maya, and they think that their life is perfect, and they think that they're making advancement in material life, but actually, that's all illusory. There's no such thing as advancement in material life, but it looks like that. Nice cars, nice houses, nice family. But over time, all those things are destroyed. The nice car becomes a junkyard car over time. The youth become old, and the wealth becomes spent, and there's poverty. So we should not be enamored by these temporary periods of sense gratification. Rather, we should be always engaged in Krishna conscious activities to please Lord Krishna. If Krishna is pleased by our activities, then all our problems go away. Okay, my dear devotees, that is our takeaway today. Vaishnava Thakura Tomara Kukura Valia Janaha More. In this way, Bhakti Vinod Thakura offers to become a Vaishnava's dog. A dog always keeps himself in his master's door and does not allow any person unfavorable to the master to enter. Similarly, one should engage in the service of a Vaishnava and try to please him in every respect. Unless one does so, he does not make spiritual advancement. Apart from spiritual advancement in the material world, if one does not develop the qualities in goodness, he cannot be promoted to the higher planetary system. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14.18, Urdhvam Gachanti Sattvasa, Madhye Tistanti Rajasa, Jaganya Gunavritti Sta, Adho Gachanti Tamasaha. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. There are many varieties of life in the different planetary systems, and these come about due to the living entities developing his qualities in goodness, passion, and ignorance. If one is in goodness, he is promoted to the higher systems. If in passion, he remains in the middle systems. And if in ignorance, he is pushed down to the lower species of life. But we don't want to be in any of those categories. We want to be in the transcendental position of love and devotion for Krishna. Then all our problems are solved, and we go merrily back to Godhead in the association of the Vaishnava Acharyas and Krishna himself. That should be our real target in practices of Krishna conscious activities, to go back to Godhead. Thank you very much, my dear devotees. I pray that you all go back to Godhead in this lifetime by practicing every day Krishna consciousness activities, hearing, chanting, and feasting by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and the Vaishnava Acharyas. Thank you very much, my dear devotees. Please have a good day. Don't worry about anything. Krishna is going to protect you in every instance if you are following the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. That is your door to the spiritual world. Thank you very much and have a good day. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare